Now we're going to talk about lighting. Lighting. Something definitely worth going over is the fact that Eevee has some really low light limits. It says here only 128 active lights can be supported by the Eevee in a scene, and only 8 shadowed sunlights can be supported at the same time. So this might sound like a low limit, and in a way it is. I definitely hit it during this project. If you tried to bring in all of those lights into React 3 Fiber for some Web3D stuff, it's going to slow to a crawl, and you don't want to do that anyways. So I would recommend trying to stick to something like 3 lights and see how it goes. I'm sure there's situations where you want tons of lights, but just know ahead of time that's going to be a headache. There's actually more to go over here than I expected because there's not that many lights. So I just thought that they would come over and we'd be good to go, but there's actually quite a few details to share with everybody. So here I have created a little environment, and I'll make this environment available in the Discord on the Web3D channel, just like I did last time. I'll have it pinned there. Obviously, it has some similar assets, different materials, but whatever. If you want to grab this file, then it'll be in Discord. See if you can identify the 6 sources of lighting that are in this image. The 6 sources that are in here are an HDRI for the environment. We've got a sun, and you can see the sun position is behind the camera to the left. You can see some of the orange from both the HDRI and the sun coming onto this bench here. We have a point light only in one of these little stone lamps. It's in this one over here. We have an area light that is above the doors. For whatever reason, I just had to put an area light in, but it's in there. And then we have emissive materials, which are the rest of these candles in the stone lamps. So I wanted to create just a little environment to test this out and see which things will make it into the conversion when we run it through the whole workflow and see what we need to do to recreate some of what we've got here. Just to illustrate the impact of each of these light sources, so you have a good idea what's going on, I'm going to go ahead and turn them off one at a time. We've got the area light over the door. You can see how much that brightened everything up, and you can really see how the shadows get cast on different things, or the shadows get removed based on a lighting. That's going to come up a lot later when we work with the React 3 Fiber stuff. Let's remove the spotlight. That is overhead. It's just highlighting the entire area, so I'm going to remove the spotlight. We've got a point light in that one candle, and you can see how its insides really light up when it's on. Turn off the sun. Actually, I'm going to turn off we'll go ahead and leave the point on. I'm going to turn that area light back off. So all you see is the one point light. And now we can go in and we will go to the global or world. And if I just set this to 0, we won't see any lighting from the environment. Right. And now that the HDRI is turned off, you can see how much lighting comes from the emissive lights. All right, I did the gltf to JSX conversion, and that went as expected. So first thing that I always do is go into the model file, and I like to set my camera to true for the default. And we can immediately see that this is all way too bright. From playing with this, I know that it's mostly from the spotlight. The intensity is way too high, so I'm just going to start taking digits off and see what happens. Let's try the directional light. Okay, so directional light and the spotlight. I'm going to bump the spotlight back up. Yep. So that's probably about right for what we're messing with. So what I wanted to show is that there's 3 lights that did make it. So of the 6 light sources, we've got maybe 3.5 that came over. And we'll talk about what to do for each one. I'm going to go ahead and delete all 3 of these for the moment. And you can see that what we're left with is the emissiveness that's in the candles. So that's the half. They don't emit light. They will light themselves so that they don't get hit with shadows. But they are not going to emit light that's going to bounce off of other things, reflect, etc. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want those to have light, then you're going to have to trick it somehow, put a light behind it with transparency, something to that degree. Or like I did with the one light, is I have a point light over it. So it's a little too bright, but it gets the idea across. That one actually looks like it has a light. We could put it inside of a transparent flame, or start playing tricks like that. But what I'm trying to say is, do not count emissive light sources as light sources. Let's just remove these 3 again so we can talk about ambient light. So if we go into the app JSX, there is ambient light intensity. And here we can set what the general, with no lighting, just what's the environmental kind of light. So this is a light that we kind of have in Blender, but it's not a 1-for-1. This is not going to act like a sun or an environment. It's its own light, just applied across the board. Kind of like in our preview mode in Blender, or Workbench. It's just an even lighting. You want to set your ambient light to something, something you can work with. Don't worry about these 2 settings yet. They're just going to be in the file, and you can mess with at least, I guess, the tone mapping exposure. If you increase or decrease this, it will change what the intensity is of all lights. So whatever values you're using, it's a modifier on that. So we've got that ambient light. And now that we've seen what the ambient light is, and we can see the emissive stuff, let's go back into model.gltf, and we're going to turn these on one at a time. So let's show the directional light. The directional light is going to be like the sun. It's the sun that got converted into a directional light. You're going to have to adjust the power, but besides that, it did its thing. But you'll notice what it did not do is it did not bring in the shadows. So even though we did shadows for the overall model, the lights are not working with any of the shadows. I don't know why that's not included in the command line for the shadows, but once we know about it, we can handle it. And I'm not sure if this directional light's going to do it. Well, we're going to see that on a different one. So let's get rid of directional light. I actually don't like it at all when we bring it over, so don't count on your sunlight. And let's get our spotlight into play. Now here you can see that this whole circle is the spotlight. Bump up the intensity, you should be able to see where that hits and where it doesn't. All right, we can zoom out and you can see what I've done with that here. And it's the same cone that was created in Blender. But again, it's quite obvious that the shadows aren't there. When we have those awnings and the light just goes straight through the awning, that's rather disconcerting. So let's add cast shadow. Okay, I took a pause to add shadows into the canvas. If you download the repo, it'll already be there, but if you're doing your own and you're not seeing the shadows, you need to add shadows inside the canvas in your app JSX. And I went ahead and left this problem here of the shadows looking like crap. So you achieve getting the shadows working, and then this happens, and it's rather disconcerting. So I do have a fix for that. I'll grab a couple of these. These should be in the file as well, so don't worry about finding them. I'll come up with a way to use them easily. So we go back into our model file, and we're going to add these into the spotlight. So in the spotlight, we need to add this extra prop for shadow size and shadow bias. And let's see what that does. Once I adjusted the shadow bias, it removed even more of those things. So I'm going to show you how I had it before. And I still had some lines in there. I'm not sure too much on the shadow bias, exactly what settings work. But once I increased it a little bit, it did what I expected. Now this water material didn't come through. I'm not worried about that. We're talking about lighting in this video, so I'm not going to get too much into the materials. That's in the previous video. Yeah, the shadows don't look too bad on this one. And you can see now that the spotlight doesn't cut through the awnings. Let's go back to directional light. Let's add those same settings. No, directional light just doesn't seem to do the shadows. All right, good to know. Let's go into the point light. Now the point light's the one that's inside of the lantern, and see what we get. And that, I think, is definitely casting shadows. I don't see any shadow funkiness. A lot of the bump in the texture is really coming through. That's probably better than I expected. But you can see how the foundation casts a shadow. There's some shadows missing for sure. Like this door frame is casting a shadow, but the pillars are not. All right, I don't see a shadow being cast by that bench either. I think I know what's going on. Put this in the notes. I think what's happening is the instances need cast shadow and receive shadow as well. Yep, that's it. So when we come up to here to merged, those properties for cast shadow and receive shadow are required. All right, that is much better. So, I mean, now we can see that the light really has an impact. It really, shines on everything that you would expect it to. I'm starting to see a little the funky shading, so we can come back and play with the shade value again. If you don't like the really detailed walkthrough like this, feel free to let me know. So I don't know what level of detail to include, but what I will do is I will try to have a summary of things to do in the repo README, as well as at the end of the video. Maybe I'll just put it in the description as well. So I'm not trying to make everybody listen through everything I have to say. I want you to get the information. So I played with the shadow bias a little more, and it seemed to remove more of those artifacts with the shadows. The spotlight is a little too, the point light, a little too harsh when it comes to its own object. It's like shining through it. But besides that, works pretty good. That's it for the ones that import easily. Now let's talk about some other tags that we can add in order to make up for some of the functionality that we're missing that didn't come over. To match what we did with an HDRI, I brought in an environment tag from Dre, and I gave it the dawn preset. Now it says right in there not to use the presets for production, so I'll just repeat that warning. You can see that the dawn brought a color with it. I don't know how to increase the intensity in the lighting. When I look at the properties for it, I don't see a lot of stuff that allows you to increase the lighting intensity, but I can tell that there's some lighting there because of that tone that it added to the walls. So if I remove the environment tag, we can see that color is no longer there. The walls aren't lit from that source. So just to show the impact again, put the environment tag back in. And you can see it did bring some lighting, and it did bring some color with it, like a HDRI would. Just like how in Eevee we have the ability to do bloom, but it's a render setting, not a light setting, we can do the same thing in React 3 Fiber by adding the bloom effect. I went ahead and added it here, and you can see it kind of adds the glow around things, including the emissive lights. It's a little overpowering when it's combined with an actual light. Let me go ahead and show you what it looks like with it turned off. All right, and you can see the difference. I'm going to turn it back on. All right, so it definitely adds something. It gives the illusion of light. It's not going to cast any shadows, but gives that effect of light. So I think where this helps is when you don't have it applied to lights, but you want it applied to the emission sources. That can be a little cooler. So let me go ahead and turn off the point light. And now we can see these glow a little more with the point light off. That's most of what we need to cover for the lighting process that comes over from React 3 Fiber. I'm going to go fix the last materials that didn't come over, and then show what it looks like afterwards. I just don't want to leave it in this state. I'd like to apply everything, whatever shadows we can do, lighting, fix the materials, and I will leave all of these settings in the file and upload it so that if you grab it, you already have them and you can play with them from there. All right, I'm back, and I've got a few things to share. But I have this to a point where I kind of like it. It's not embarrassing. It doesn't look unfinished anymore. Not spectacular, but it's a little environment. So I've got the transparent panels here, and they are showing probably a little too much transparency, but I like that they are showing transparently with some blur of the HDRI environment that we've got. So that works out pretty good. I tried putting a light behind these doors over here to just have them project the light through, and that wasn't working. So if anybody comes up with an idea on that, let me know. I reduced this water material to just a semi-transparent blue. It works good enough. I think it could have a texture on it on the top for sure. Took out all the little candles that didn't have a point light. I feel like having the emission for a candle, but only each one that I wanted to emit light should have a point light. So either needed to pair them with a point light or take them out. So I did that. When it came to this one pillar over here that was, or the lamp that wasn't working out, like the textures were weird, it ended up being a hidden object in the same location. So once I found that, deleted it, it's good to go. The columns were just using the wrong material. So, you have to hunt down all those individual issues. Now that I've got this close, let's go ahead and play with it a little bit. I don't like how dark the shadows are. It makes it hard to see probably some details that can come through. Something like that might be a little better. Plus it makes the candlelight not seem quite so harsh. And something like that. Not bad for a web environment. Obviously you can later control some camera movements and stuff within here and have some fun. But thanks for joining me on this. I enjoyed putting it together. Each time I get a little more detailed on doing these environments, I always find other things, peripheral things that I am improving, even if it's not the topic. And, that's just the nature of working with this stuff. You just have to keep doing it in order to improve in multiple ways. There's no, I don't believe in just learning it all and then applying. You just you keep trying and see how it goes. Next tutorial video is going to be on animation.